Hello, I'm really glad you're here tonight. This hour is different from the rest of the day. It doesn't ask you to decide anything. It doesn't ask you to perform or explain or keep up. It simply invites you to lie still and let your thoughts move at their own pace. As the years pass, nighttime becomes a kind of companion, a place where the mind is free to wander without interruption, where memories return, not urgently, but patiently, where understanding settles in quietly, without needing words. Later in life, the mind doesn't race the way it once did. It reflects, it revisits, it connects dots that once seemed unrelated. And it does this most honestly when the lights are off and the world has gone silent. This space is for those thoughts, the ones that don't surface during the day, the ones that arrive only when you're alone with yourself, resting, remembering, and gently making sense of a long-lived-in life. So take a slow breath, let your body soften into the bed, and allow this night to meet you where you are. And now, before we begin, if this kind of honest, gentle reflection speaks to you, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And down in the comments, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are right now. There's something comforting about knowing we're all here together, scattered across time zones, but united in these late hours when the world finally grows still. So settle in, adjust your pillows, find a comfortable position, and know that for the next hour, you're not alone in whatever wisdom you're carrying, whatever understanding you've earned, whatever truths rise to the surface when the lights go out. Let's begin. You are lying still right now, and the darkness around you is quiet, and somewhere beneath the ordinary silence of this night, something older is stirring. Something carried in the air, the way scent travels across open land without any invitation. Close your eyes and feel it. Feel the ground beneath you, steady and patient. Feel the weight of the blanket across your body, warm and real. And let yourself go somewhere far from here. Let yourself go back to a world that existed 1,000 years ago on a vast and windswept plateau between the mountains of northern China and the rolling grasslands of Mongolia, where a people called the Khitan built an empire that history nearly forgot and lived in ways that the modern world can barely imagine. You are there now, you are on the steppe. The sky above you is immense. You have never seen a sky like this in your ordinary life. It does not end, it does not press down. It simply opens in every direction, a blue so deep in the daylight that it seems to breathe, a black so full of stars at night that the darkness itself feels generous. The wind moves across the grass, in long slow waves, the way water moves across the surface of a lake when something large has passed beneath it. You feel it against your face, you feel it in your hair, you feel it as a presence, not an intrusion. The wind here is not the wind of buildings and corners and streets. It is the wind of open distance, the wind of hundreds of miles of nothing between you and the horizon. You are a person of the Kitan. You belong to this landscape the way the cranes belong to it, the way the wolves belong to it, the way the grass itself belongs to it. You have never lived within walls that could not be taken down. You have never slept in a room that could not be moved. Your home is not a place. Your home is a way of being. And tonight, you understand that completely, because you are lying in your felt yurt on the steppe of the Liao Dynasty, and the year is somewhere between the rising of this great empire in 907 and its slow fading in 1125, and everything about your existence is woven together with the land beneath you, the animals beside you, and the sky that holds everything without distinction. Let me tell you about the felt. Let me tell you about it slowly, the way it deserves to be told. The felt that surrounds you tonight did not arrive ready-made from any market or warehouse. It was made by hands, you know. It was made by the women of your camp, your Ordo, in the weeks before the first hard frost of autumn, when the air carried that particular sharpness that said the warm season was ending and the serious work of preparation needed to begin. You watched it happen. You were part of it, in whatever way your age and role allowed. And even if you only watched, the watching itself taught you things that live in your body now, in the way your hands understand texture and weight and tension without being asked. The wool came first, sheep were shorn in the spring, and the fleece was collected and stored, washed and beaten and aired until it was clean and full and light as cloud. Then the women spread it on the ground in thick layers, evening it out with their palms and their fingers, feeling for thin spots, building up the density where it was needed. You can feel that motion now, in the sleepy looseness of your own hands. That pressing and smoothing, that patient rhythmic work. It was never hurried, it was never careless. Because felt is not woven, felt is persuaded. The fibres are not interlocked by design. They are coaxed into each other by moisture and pressure and friction, applied again and again until the separate threads forget they were ever separate, until they become one continuous surface, dense and warm and capable of keeping out the wind that would otherwise take all warmth from a sleeping body. The women poured warm water over the laid wool. They walked on it, rolling it with their feet and sometimes with long wooden poles, pressing, always pressing, folding it back on itself and rolling it again. This went on for hours, sometimes an entire day for a single panel, and the songs they sang while they worked were not entertainment. They were part of the work. The rhythm of the song set the rhythm of the pressing. The melody measured the time. The words carried the knowledge of how long each stage needed to last. You know those songs. Even now, even here in the quiet of this night, you can feel the rhythm of them, somewhere in your chest. A steady pulse, a patient repetition. Something that says, this cannot be rushed, and rushing it would ruin it. And the cold does not care whether you were tired when you made the felt, only whether the felt is good enough to keep it out. The panels came together slowly over many weeks. Each one was tested against the light, held up to the sky to see if the thickness was even, pressed between the palms to feel whether the fibres had truly locked. When a panel was finished, it was set aside to dry in the wind, stiffening and settling into its final form. And when enough panels were finished, the real work of stitching began. This is what you want to rest in tonight, the stitching. Because the stitching of a yurt's felt covering is one of the most intimate acts of craft that this culture produced, and it happened in firelight, in the evenings, when the children were quieting and the horses were still, and the camp had reached that particular hour of day when urgency releases its grip and something slower and more honest takes its place. The women sat together, not always in silence, sometimes talking, sometimes singing softly, sometimes simply present with each other in the way that shared work creates a presence that conversation cannot always match. The needles they used were made from bone, long and curved, strong enough to push through the dense felt without breaking. The thread was sinew, or sometimes wool spun very tight, waxed to move smoothly through the thick material. The stitches were large and even, not decorative in the way that later embroidery would be decorative, but functional, binding the panels at their edges so that when the covering was laid over the wooden lattice frame of the yurt, the seams would hold against the wind's insistence. But there was beauty in it too. There is always beauty in work done with care and knowledge. The joining of the panels created patterns at the seams, lines that ran across the surface of the finished yurt, like the lines of a landscape seen from high above, and sometimes along the edges and around the opening where the smoke hole let the fire breathe. The women did add colour. Strips of dyed felt in red and blue and black, stitched along the borders. Small geometric shapes pressed into the surface while the felt was still wet, creating texture and pattern that identified whose yurt this was, which family, which lineage, which connection to the larger web of the Ordo and the tribe. Your yurt knows who you are. Its felt carries your family's marking. When other people of the steppe see your home from a distance, moving across the grass in the blue shimmer of a summer morning, they can read something of your identity in the way the covering is made, in the colours at the smoke hole rim, in the particular pattern of the stitching at the base. You are not anonymous on this landscape. You are legible. You are known. And now you are inside your yurt, and you are lying down, and the felt is doing what it was made to do. It is holding the warmth close. It is keeping the wind at bay. The cold outside is real. It is the cold of the steppe. in the deep watches of night. A cold that does not feel the way urban cold feels, muffled and manageable, and full of the possibility of stepping back inside. This cold is the original cold, the cold of open distance. And the felt stands between you and it, 3 or 4 fingers thick, layered and dense, doing its patient work without any drama, without any acknowledgement, the way all the best things in life do their work. Let your body feel that. Let yourself trust the warmth around you, the way the people of the Liao trusted their felt. Not with anxiety, not with the constant checking and adjusting that modern life encourages, but with the deep, settled trust of knowing that the people who made this were skilled, and that skilled people make things that last, and that the cold tonight is nothing the felt cannot handle. You breathe slowly, in and out. The smoke from the fire in the center of the yurt has mostly risen and escaped through the tuno, the circular opening at the top, but the warmth it left remains, gathered and held by the curved walls around you. The smell of the interior is layered, wool, smoke, the faint smell of the animals that live close by, the smell of the food that was cooked earlier, mutton broth with wild onions, the steam of it still somewhere in the air. These smells are not unpleasant. They are the smell of home. They are the smell of being alive and provided for, of being part of something that works. Now let your mind move gently to the horses, because you cannot understand this life without the horses. They are not separate from you. They are not a tool you use. They are partners in the most complete sense of that word. And the relationship between the Khitan people and their horses was one of the most intricate and tender partnerships in the whole of human history. The mares especially. Every morning before the sun had fully cleared the horizon, before the camp was fully awake, the milking began. You know this. You have done this. If you are a woman of the camp, you have done this every morning of your adult life, and probably since you were old enough to be trusted with the bucket. If you are a man, you have done it too in the early years, learning the animals, learning to read their patience and their resistance, learning where to stand and how to move, so that neither you nor the mare was startled, so that the whole transaction could proceed in that particular atmosphere of mutual cooperation that makes milking possible. A mare will not give her milk to someone she does not trust. This is not a complication. This is not a problem to be solved with technique. It is the basic fact of the relationship. And the Kitan understood it the way they understood weather and grass and the movement of seasons. Not as something to be overcome, but as something to be honoured, worked with, respected. You earned the mare's trust over time. You were present around her consistently, not just at milking time, but throughout the day, so that your smell and your voice and your movements became familiar, became expected, became part of the ordinary texture of her existence. Then the milking was not extraction. It was exchange, and you stood at her left side as tradition and safety required. Your hands were warm. You had warmed them deliberately, because cold hands startled the animal, and cold hands made her close against you. And a mare that closes is telling you something important, something you needed to listen to rather than fight. Your hands were warm, and your movements were steady, and your breathing was slow, and she could hear your breathing, and she could feel your calm, and calm was contagious in both directions. The foal was brought close first. This was the ritual. The foal nursed briefly, just enough to begin the flow, to invite the milk down. Then it was gently moved aside, and the milking began properly. The hands working in alternation. The rhythm again, that rhythm that seems to underlie all the important work of this life on the steppe. Press and release. Press and release. Not pulling, never pulling, because pulling was pain and pain was a violation, and violation meant tomorrow's milking would be harder and next week's harder still, and the relationship was not worth damaging for the sake of a faster bucket. The milk that came was thin and slightly blue-white, different from the milk of cows, lighter and richer at once. It was called chige in its fresh form, and it was everything. It was drunk fresh in the mornings, warm from the animal, with a sweetness that you could not replicate in any other way at any other time. It was set aside in leather bags, the large ones that hung at the yurt entrance, to ferment slowly over the course of the day, agitated regularly by the people passing in and out, each one giving the bag a press or a shake as they came through the door. This was not deliberate. It was simply habit. It was the way the household worked together without planning, each member of the family contributing to a process that fed everyone, without anyone having to be asked. By evening, the fermented milk had become Airag. You know this taste. It lives somewhere in your memory tonight, even if you have never actually tasted it in this life. It is slightly sour and faintly fizzy, and cool on the tongue, and gentle in the body. And it is the taste of the steppe in summer, the taste of long days and warm grass, and the particular contentment that comes from living well within a difficult landscape. It warmed you from the inside in a way that was different from the warmth of fire. It was the warmth of nourishment, of being truly fed by the land and the animals that the land sustained. And the surplus milk that was not drunk fresh and not made into Airag was pressed into curds, dried in the sun and the wind until it was hard as stone and could be stored for months, carried on long journeys, dissolved in water or broth when there was nothing else, sustaining life on the march with a density of nourishment that almost nothing else could match. The Khitan called this arul, this dried curd, and it was the taste of survival, of the knowledge that the land was generous enough, if you knew how to receive its generosity with the proper patience and skill. Let your breathing deepen now. Let the rhythm of the milking settle into your chest. Press and release. The mare's warmth under your hands, the steam of her breath in the cold morning air, the sound of the milk entering the bucket, at first in spurts, then settling into that particular steady sound that meant everything was going well, that trust had been established, that this morning's exchange would be a good one. You are very nearly asleep, but stay just a little longer in this world, because there is one more thing you need to feel before you drift fully away, and that is the movement, the great seasonal movement of the Ordo across the steppe. You did not stay in one place. That is perhaps the hardest thing for a modern mind to truly absorb about this life. You were not a person who returned to the same walls night after night, year after year. You were a person in motion. You followed the grass, and the grass followed the seasons, and the seasons turned in a great circle that your people had been tracing for generations, before you were born, and would continue tracing for generations after you were gone. In spring, when the ice broke on the rivers and the first green appeared on the south-facing slopes, the camp began to stir. You can feel it now, that particular restlessness that preceded a move. Not anxiety, not the stress of displacement, something more like anticipation, like the feeling before a journey you have been planning for months and know will be good. The animals felt it too. The horses grew lively. The dogs circled the edges of the camp with a new alertness. Even the children seemed to understand, though no one had announced the departure date formally, that the time for moving was approaching. The yurt came down in a way that was precise and practiced, each step known by every adult in the camp without having to be discussed. The felt panels were unlaced and rolled, each one carefully, because the felt that took weeks to make could be damaged by careless handling. The wooden lattice of the walls was folded into its sections. The roof poles were bundled. The tonneau, the heavy circular crown piece, was lifted down and wrapped. Everything had its place on the cart. Everything had its correct orientation, its correct order of loading, so that when the time came to set up again at the summer pasture, the process of assembly would flow just as smoothly, each piece arriving in the order it was needed. The carts were loaded by the women, as the yurts had been built by the women, because the interior world of the Ordo and its physical organization were the domain of women in Khitan society, in a way that carried real authority. The man who said the time had come to move was making a decision about pasture and route, but the woman who oversaw the loading of the cart was making decisions about survival, about whether the dried milk was packed in the right order for access on the road, about whether the water skins were full and the fuel supply sufficient for the days of travel, about whether the children's winter clothing was stored where it could be reached quickly if the weather turned. You watched all of this with the eyes of someone who has watched it many times before and will watch it many times again. And in the watching, you understood something that the modern world rarely teaches, that competence, quiet and deep and practiced competence, is one of the most beautiful things a human being can possess. Not the performed competence of the person who wants to be seen knowing things, but the real competence of the person who simply knows, whose hands know, whose body knows, whose whole self has absorbed the knowledge so completely that the work flows without effort, without hesitation, without the need for praise. Rest now. The procession began. The horses moved first, driven by the younger riders who knew how to keep them from scattering, who had learned the language of the herd well enough to guide without driving, to suggest direction without forcing it. Then the carts, heavy and slow, the oxen patient under their loads. Then the sheep and the goats, moving in their gentle, uncertain way, requiring constant attention, constant gentle correction. And somewhere in the middle of it all, the families, the children on smaller horses, or riding atop the loaded carts, the elders sitting in the places of honor, the whole community in motion together, a living river crossing the landscape. And the landscape received you. That is the only word for it. The steppe did not resist the passage of the Ordo. It opened. The grass bent under the wheels, and the hooves and rose again behind you, and the sky moved above you at its own pace. And the days of travel were long, but not exhausting, in the way that modern travel exhausts, because you were moving at the speed of the land itself, the speed of animals and seasons, and at that speed the distance becomes a companion rather than an obstacle. You are still in this memory now, still on the road between winter pasture and summer pasture. Still part of this great living procession that has been moving across the face of the earth since before anyone thought to write down what they saw. Let yourself feel the rhythm of the animal beneath you if you are riding, the slow rocking, the warmth of the horse's back rising through the blanket you are sitting on, the sound of hooves on soft earth, a sound so continuous and so steady that after an hour it becomes indistinguishable from silence, becomes the background against which everything else is heard. You watch the horizon. On the steppe, the horizon is always present. It does not hide behind buildings or trees or hills. It simply sits there, steady and distant and patient, reminding you that the world is vast and you are moving through it at your own measured pace. This is a different relationship with distance than the modern world allows. Distance in the modern world is something to be eliminated as quickly as possible. It is a problem. It is the space between you and where you want to be, and the goal is to reduce it to nothing as efficiently as you can. But on the steppe, distance is the medium you live in. You're not trying to close the gap between yourself and the horizon. You're simply moving through the world that exists between here and there, and the world between here and there is your actual life, not the obstacle to it. This is something you carry with you tonight, even as you lie here in your own bed, in your own time, far from any steppe. The understanding that the space between things is not empty, that the in-between is not waiting, that the road is not merely the means of reaching the destination, but is itself a place where real things happen, where real understanding arrives, where you are most fully present and most fully alive. Let your body settle deeper into the bed now. Feel the mattress beneath you, taking your weight completely. Feel the covers across your chest and your legs. Feel the particular stillness of the room around you, and carry the steppe inside this stillness. Carry the open sky inside the closed ceiling. Carry the wide grass inside the narrow space of this room, because those places exist inside you now, because you have been there tonight, and going there has left something in you that did not exist before. A kind of spaciousness, a kind of patience, the patience of someone who has travelled far and knows the journey has its own wisdom. The summer pasture, when the Ordo arrived, was everything the winter pasture was not. If the winter ground had been brown and bare and sheltering in valleys where the wind could not reach, the summer ground was high and open, and green in a way that seemed almost excessive after the long months of scarcity. The grass here was knee-high on a standing person. It was full of wild flowers that you did not know the names of, individually but recognized collectively as the sign that the season had turned completely, that the long dark and the long cold were genuinely behind you, and the months of abundance had begun. The yurt went up quickly here, more quickly than it came down, always, because putting things back together is easier than taking them apart when you truly know what you are doing. The lattice walls expanded in their accordion sections and were lashed together into a circle. The roof poles were inserted, one by one, each one slotting into the crown piece at the top and resting at the bottom in the notches of the wall lattice. The felt panels were lifted and laid over the wooden skeleton, laced and tied into place, the door frame set into its opening. The door itself, a heavy piece of felt stretched over a wooden frame, hung in position. And then the fire was lit. This was the moment that made a yurt a home rather than a structure. The fire at the centre, the smoke rising through the tonneau toward whatever sky was present above, whether clear or clouded, whether star-filled or grey with coming rain. The fire was not just heat and light, it was the heart of the home. It was the place where the family gathered, where food was made, where the day was discussed and the evening unwound. The fire was the centre around which all the life of the yurt organised itself, the way all the spokes of a wheel organised themselves around the hub, pointing inward and outward simultaneously. You sat by that fire on the first evening in the summer pasture. You were tired from the journey. Your body carried the particular tiredness of days of travel, not the exhausted collapse of someone who has worked too hard, but the deep, satisfied heaviness of someone who has moved through a great deal of world and arrived somewhere good. Your legs were tired, your back was tired, but your eyes were awake, watching the fire, watching the sparks rise and find the smoke hole and disappear into the darkening sky above. The others were around you. This is important. You were never alone in this life the way modern people are alone. The Ordo was your constant context, your permanent surround. The voices of your camp were always audible, always present, always a reminder that you were embedded in something larger than yourself, that your survival and your meaning were both woven through with the lives of the people around you. This was not a burden, this was a comfort. The modern loneliness that comes from living in proximity to many people while being truly known by almost none of them was not part of your experience. You were known, you were seen, you were part of a fabric, a felt fabric, if you will, where the individual fibres had pressed against each other long enough to forget they were ever separate. The summer on the high pasture had its own rhythm, its own daily pattern that was different from the winter pattern, but just as precise. The morning milking happened here too, earlier than in winter, because the sun rose earlier and the mares were ready earlier, their bodies calibrated to the light in ways that no artificial schedule could alter. The horses were taken further afield to graze during the long days, and the person who rode with them, usually a young man or an older child learning the work, would be gone for hours, moving at the edge of the visible world, a small dark shape against the enormous green and blue, responsible for the safety of animals that were worth more than almost anything else the family possessed. You think about that rider sometimes. You can see him from the yurt door. He is small with distance, but you can read his posture, the way you can read the posture of anyone you know well enough. You can tell from his shoulders whether the horses are calm or nervous. You can tell from the way he sits whether the day is going easily or something has needed his attention. You know him the way you know all the people in the Ordo, not from what they say about themselves, but from long, close observation of how they move through the world. This is a kind of knowledge that takes years to build and cannot be faked or hurried. It is the knowledge that comes from living alongside someone through the full range of seasons and circumstances, through the good years and the hard ones, through loss and through abundance, until their body becomes as readable to you as your own. You know the children this way too. You have watched them grow. You have watched their bodies change from the soft uncertainty of infancy to the particular confidence that comes to a child who has learned to ride, who has been given real work to do and has done it well. A Khitan child who could ride was a different creature, than a child who could not. The horse gave them a relationship with space and speed and animal partnership that changed their understanding of the world at a fundamental level. It gave them confidence, not in the brittle, performed way of someone who has been told they are competent, but in the deep, quiet way of someone who has actually done things and survived them and learned from them. Let your own body remember what it felt like to learn something real, something physical and demanding and genuinely important. Something where the stakes were real and the feedback was immediate, and the knowledge, when it came, settled into your muscles and your bones and your nervous system, rather than just your mind. That kind of learning does not leave. It does not fade the way facts fade. It lives in your body for the rest of your life, available at any moment, requiring no effort to retrieve. This is the kind of knowledge the Steppe gave to everyone who lived on it. Not just to the riders and the felters and the milkers, to everyone. Because everyone had real work to do. Everyone's contribution mattered. Everyone knew what it felt like to be genuinely needed. Autumn came, the way autumn always comes on the steppe. Not suddenly, but inevitably. The light shifted first. You noticed it in the quality of the afternoon light, the way it lay at a lower angle across the grass, making long shadows even in the middle of the day, turning everything golden in a way that was beautiful. And also, if you were paying attention, a little urgent. Then the nights grew colder, not dramatically but steadily, each one a few degrees below the one before, until the morning grass began to carry frost, and the water in the buckets near the door had a thin skin of ice on it before the fire was restarted. The animals knew before you did. The horses grew their winter coats, the long thick hair coming in gradually through September and October, changing their silhouettes, making them look heavier and more serious than they had looked in the light ease of summer. The sheep did the same. The dogs spent more time close to the fire at the yurt entrance, less time ranging widely through the camp. Everything contracted, everything began its long preparation for the cold. The felt making, which you had watched begin weeks ago, entered its final stage. The panels that had been made and dried and tested were now being assembled into their full covering. The stitching done and redone at any seam that showed weakness. The borders reinforced, where experience said the wind always found its way in. The women worked with particular urgency in this phase, not the panicked urgency of someone who has run out of time, but the focused urgency of someone who understands exactly what is at stake and has calculated precisely how long they have to finish. They had done this before. They knew the schedule, they knew the cold was coming, and they knew when it would arrive, and they were going to be ready. This readiness, this calm, experienced readiness. Let it settle into you now. Let it be something you carry from this night forward into your own life. The readiness that comes not from anxious preparation or frantic planning, but from deep knowledge acquired over years of doing the same thing well, of failing and learning and doing it better, of understanding the rhythms of your own particular world so completely that the arrival of difficulty does not surprise you because you have been preparing for it all along. The Khitan Empress in the great Ordo of the Liao court practiced the same readiness. Because the court of the Liao Dynasty was not a fixed court. It did not sit in a single capital behind stone walls. It moved. The emperor, the empress, the nobles, the officials, the whole complex apparatus of an empire that governed millions of people, all of it travelled with the seasons the way the ordinary families of the steppe travelled. The great seasonal migrations of the imperial Ordo were called the Nabo, the seasonal circuits, and they were one of the most remarkable expressions of government that the ancient world produced. An empire that refused to stop moving. A throne that had wheels. The imperial yurt was larger than yours, naturally. Its felt was dyed in colours that announced the rank and power of its inhabitant. The wooden frame was lacquered and carved. The interior was hung with silk imported from China. The brilliant reds and golds of the southern courts brought north and incorporated into a space that was fundamentally nomadic, that could be taken down and moved in a matter of hours. This combination of nomadic form and imperial content was the genius of the Liao. They did not have to choose between the steppe and civilization. They made a civilization that moved. You think about this as you lie here. The idea that civilization does not require permanence, that culture does not require fixed walls, that the deepest human values, the ones that actually matter, the care for children, and the honoring of elders, and the tending of animals, and the making of beautiful things, and the gathering together in warmth against the cold, none of these require a permanent address. They require only people who carry them faithfully from place to place, season to season, generation to generation. The Liao Empire lasted more than 200 years, from 907, when the Khitan leader Abaoji united the tribes and declared himself emperor, to 1125, when the Jurchen people from the north and east finally broke what 2 centuries of imperial power had built. 200 years of a moving court, 200 years of Felton horses and seasonal migrations, woven together with diplomatic correspondence and legal codes and trade agreements, and the management of vast territories that stretched from the Mongolian plateau to the Yellow Sea. When the empire fell, the Khitans scattered. Some went west, far to the west, beyond the mountains of Central Asia, and established a new kingdom called the Kara Kitai, the Black Kitan, that governed parts of Central Asia for another century. Some were absorbed into the Yurt dynasty that replaced them. Some simply continued their seasonal circuits on the steppe, as their ancestors had done before the empire, as the land had always invited them to do. The grass came back, the sky remained, the seasonal migrations continued. The knowledge of felt making and horse milking and seasonal movements persisted in the bodies of the people who had always known these things, regardless of who claimed to rule the land they crossed. This persistence, this quiet, bodily persistence of essential knowledge. It is perhaps the most important thing the Liao story can teach us, lying here in the warmth of our own time, our own bed, our own small enclosure against the dark. Knowledge that lives in the hands does not fall with empires. Knowledge that lives in the body does not depend on the survival of any particular political arrangement. When the Liao court scattered, the women still knew how to make felt. The horsemen still knew how to read the herd. The families still knew which valleys gave shelter in winter and which hillsides turned green first in spring. The empire was gone, but the competence remained, and competence is ultimately more durable than power. What do you carry in your hands tonight? What knowledge lives in your body that does not depend on any institution or arrangement for its survival? What have you learned, truly learned, in the long course of your own life that would persist through any disruption, that belongs to you so completely that no circumstance could take it from you? These are not questions that need answers tonight. They are simply questions worth sitting with in the dark, in the warmth, in the particular openness that comes at the end of a long journey through another world and another time. Your breathing is very slow now. Your body is very still. The steppe is quieting around you, the way the steppe always quiets at this hour. The wind dropping with the cooling of the air, the grass settling into its nighttime stillness, the horses standing close together for warmth at the edge of the camp, their breathing audible and steady, their presence a comfort, even in sleep. The fire in the yurt has burned down to coals. They glow orange and red in the center of the floor, giving just enough light to see the curve of the felt walls around you, just enough warmth to keep the night's cold from entering. The tuno above shows a circle of sky, stars, the same stars that are above you right now, in your own home, in your own night, the same stars that have always been above every bed that every person has ever slept in, on every step, and in every city, and in every quiet room where someone has pulled the covers up and surrendered to sleep. The stars connect you, not metaphorically, actually. The light entering the tuno of a Kitan yurt 1,000 years ago left the same stars that are shining above your roof tonight. The photons are different, but the sources are the same. The sky is continuous. Time moves through it, but does not change it. The same darkness, the same cold fire of the stars, the same invitation to close your eyes and trust that morning will come. And it will come. as it always has, as it always will. For as long as there is a world with days and nights, with seasons that turn, with grass that grows and ice that melts, and light that returns after the long dark, morning will come for you the way it came for every person who ever pulled a felt cover-up in the deep watches of night on the Mongolian steppe, and felt the warmth close around them, and let their eyes grow heavy, and their breathing deepen, and their body surrender at last to the rest it needed. You have earned this rest. You have travelled far tonight. You have lived in another time, another body, another relationship with the world. You have made felt with your hands, and milked mares in the cold morning, and loaded carts for the long seasonal journey, and sat by fires while empires rose and fell around you, and the grass continued to grow, and the horses continued to move across the landscape in their patient, beautiful way. All of that is inside you now. All of that knowledge, all of that patient competence, all of that deep and ancient understanding of how to live well within the terms that the world actually offers, rather than the terms you wish it would offer. It is inside you. You carry it. It is yours. Let your hands be still. Let your shoulders release. Let your jaw soften. Let your body be still as the steppe after dark. The fires die down, the stories settle, and the world grows still. Let your thoughts drift away like embers on the wind. Good night. You have journeyed far through time tonight. Now it is time to journey into dreams. Close your eyes, breathe, and let sleep find you.